Broadcasting from the heart of the nation, in the Hoosier Media Network studios, the next generation in conservative talk radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Yes, it is. What is up, my friends? Welcome into it. We're ready for another weekend. Strap in, buckle up, and hold on tight. We have plenty to talk about as usual, and it's always great to have you with us for the ride as the Hoosier-holics that you are across the nation, no matter where you may be, hanging out with us, doing our thing. Welcome into it. It is the Voice of Reason. My name is Andy Hoosier, broadcasting right here in the heart of the nation in Wichita, Kansas, on our Hoosier Media Network studios. But we are all over the country with so many great radio affiliates doing the thing.
We'll do it live.
Like we do every single weekend on the show. If you want to find us, here's how you can do so. HoosierReason.com. Very simple. HOOSER Reason.com. You can find us there. Subscribe to the newsletter. That did come out this past week. So if you're just signing up now, the hell took you so long, man? Our newsletter comes out the first Monday of every single month, and you can sign up, become a Hoosier-holic. You can see our blogs on there. You can see all the great partners that we have with our partners for the show and radio affiliates and so on and so forth. And just be awesome and hang out with us as we continue to grow like a Kansas weed across the nation. All right, last to cover, Alejandro Ramos on the show today. He is the founder and executive director for the Ramos Research Institute. We're going to chat with him about patriotism. I want you to look around, unless you're driving. Keep your eyes on the road. I see what you're doing there. But look around. Do you see a lot of American flags? Do you see people prideful of the nation, especially the younger generations that have now gone through the public education system and have failed miserably on learning about civics, about the greatness of this nation, and more? So we're going to talk about patriotism, specifically with the young generation, and can we bring Pride for America back over the next few years? The idea of nationalism, being proudful and prideful of your nation, is that something we need to be concerned about, or is it something we need to get back? That's a conversation we'll have in just a little bit. First and foremost, before we get into the big issues from this weekend and throughout the week, this weekend is a very historical time. I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but I want to go all the way back to August 9th, 1945. And no matter where you're listening to this program, this weekend is a monumental time of when the second atomic bomb was dropped by the United States on Nagasaki, after the first one being dropped on August 6th, 1945 in Hiroshima, and ending essentially World War II. And it's a extremely significant time because it was against a nation at the time that we were obviously fighting in a world war and that didn't know the word surrender in their language. And guess what? After two atomic bombs dropped and tens of thousands of individuals dying both immediately and long term, they figured out how to say surrender pretty quickly. And it's not something that, do you discuss, is it worth it? Should we have done it? Was it worth killing all those people? That's a deeper conversation that we don't want to get into today, but it's a historical weekend for sure of when the second atomic bomb was actually dropped in 1945, August 9th. That was the two bombs, by the way, were called Little Boy and Fat Man. And the Fat Man was dropped this weekend, ending the Second World War. And the Japanese learned really quickly what a word surrender actually looked like. And in the long term, was it devastating at the time? Absolutely. Was it worth it? Probably, because it could have turned out completely different if we had not done something like that to really shock all the world that we were not going to take any crap any longer. Kind of resemblance of what we had seen under the Trump administration for the first 6 months already, right? I mean, Donald Trump dropped some bombs in Iran, which everybody had threatened to do. No one even considered actually doing for a really long time. And Donald Trump did it. We're not going to start a war. We're not going to do a long-term conflict. We're not going to invest in the military-industrial complex, but we're going to drop the bomb. We're going to end a nuclear program, and then we're going to start bringing peace to the Middle East. And now what's happening? We're seeing peace agreements created all over the country. Donald Trump doing that just this week with two nations.
President of the United States, the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia will now sign the joint declaration on the outcomes of the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity Summit.
That's really
They will sign 3 copies in English. The President of the United States signs as a witness to the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, affirming their path to peace, stability, and prosperity. We kindly ask that all guests remain seated for the signing of the documents.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Another peace agreement. Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. What? And I think that's another one that needs to go under the notch of Donald Trump and the fact that he is bringing peace around the world. We are no longer in war times, even though there are still conflicts and wars going on around the world. We have Donald Trump meeting with Vladimir Putin coming up this next week, which we'll chat about in just a bit and what we could see from that one. But this is just a step in the right direction, trying to end conflicts. And sometimes you have to flex the muscle and say, we're not going to deal with it any longer. Just as the Japanese, after bombing Pearl Harbor, said that they were fearful that they had awoken a sleeping giant. That's exactly what happened. And look where that led to with the ending of World War II after dropping 2 atomic bombs, that second one that had happened this same weekend in 1945. So some cool history going into the program. That's where we start things off, but there are plenty of things happening on the domestic level, and let's go there here, shall we?
What's trending today?
So as you know, I want to go down to our great affiliates down in the state of Texas, and we have many of them from Amarillo, Texas, all the way down to Houston, San Antonio, and in Kerrville, where the Texas flooding happened just a few weeks ago. We have wonderful, great affiliates down there, and I want to focus on you for a moment. You've been in the news lately, haven't you, with all your redistricting shenanigans? Oh, you that are trying to do whatever the puppet, that being the puppet of what Donald Trump tries to tell you to do. And I'm telling you, you are causing some shakeup on the national political scene, and I have to admit it's kind of awesome. Well done, state of Texas. I want to give you a round of applause since we're broadcasting down there right now, because here's the thing. Donald Trump has been the genius in exposing corruption. And here's what I mean. Gerrymandering has been an issue for a really long time. I mean, it's been one of those where we can sit across the bar from each other, and Republicans and Democrats, conservatives, progressive, liberals, we can all sit across from each other and be like, yeah, gerrymandering sucks. We should never do that. And then we see both sides, predominantly Democrats, but both sides that end up doing it. And it's one of those where we always complain about it, but we never really do anything about it because we don't necessarily understand the issue or understand how to actually fix it. So it's one of those where we all grumble and mumble about it, but then we see redistricting lines every 10 years or so, and then we just go about our day and be like, oh, I guess I'm in a different congressional district. Populations change, people move, immigration comes in, all these other issues, and it redraws the lines constantly, and we see a centralization of the larger cities, and we see the rural communities continue to struggle to have any kind of representation because they're so sparse out there, which we need to have because of agricultural land and so on and so forth. So that being said, Texas, well done. We are redistricting in a way that is going to be more representative for the state of Texas. Texas went dramatically farther right during the election in November. Texas has had more than 500,000 voters come in and new people move to the state since the last census was done, 3, 4, 5 years ago, whenever it was after the turn. And now things are different. After the election in November, it showed things are different. In Congress, especially the House of Representatives, the lower chamber of Congress, is the best, closest, most connected representation that people have at the federal level. I mean, that's why we have so many different districts based on a relatively same population size, and that's why we continuously redraw them to better represent them in the best way possible in this lower chamber that is the House of Representatives. And if we've had a dramatic shift in Texas, the districts need to realign that way. But Democrats don't see it that way. In fact, now it's led to a nationwide conversation about redistricting. It's led to a nationwide conversation about gerrymandering. We have California out there with Gavin Newsom yelling and screaming about activism from Democrats and how we need to stand up to the unconstitutional Republicans so badly that he says that they're just going to override and undo their own constitution in California to rewrite it so that way they don't have to have a third party actually do their redistricting, but the governor and the state legislature can do it themselves. Yeah, that's how loony they are. Now, they already have done gerrymandering to the nth degree, and I don't know how much more they could possibly do. Illinois is the same way. New York's the same way. I mean, it's already terrible. I don't know how many more you could squeeze out, but I'm sure you could find a way. So that's where we're at. Now bringing a nationwide conversation to redistricting. And I got to say again, President Donald Trump, in his genius move to not only call for redistricting in Texas, but also now a call for redoing the census without illegal migrants on the census, he has now brought an issue that has been a concern for the American people for decades and has uncovered it. It's almost like if you're hiking, it's summertime, right? You're going to be hiking in the trails, walking outdoors, enjoying, and you flip over the rock. And under the rock, you see the dark, moist, wet soil with the worms sticking out, the spiders crawling everywhere, the beetles all over the place. It's the underbelly of society that we always know is there, They've never gone anywhere, but we never want to look at it because we never know how to address it. Donald Trump has a way, as he continues to hit that reset button in Washington, D.C., to bring this out, to bring it up to the surface and make us address it, because out of chaos becomes organization. Out of chaos and anarchy comes order. And that's really exciting. And that's what we've seen under the Trump administration, bringing out the chaos where everybody says Donald Trump's administration's chaotic, that he's causing anarchy, he's overturning the Constitution. He's not doing any of that. All he's doing is bringing the stuff that's always been there and bringing it to the surface to where we can address it. Maybe we can pass some more laws on gerrymandering. Maybe we can redraw lines in multiple different states and show how out of balance they actually are. And then we can move forward in a better, positive manner for the long term. And to me, I say that's good news. I said that's really good news. J.D. Vance was actually speaking, I believe it was on Fox News early on Saturday morning this weekend, and had talked about this for the redistricting.
If California has crazy gerrymanders, Illinois has crazy gerrymanders, New York has crazy gerrymanders, what it does is it actually suppresses the will of the people in states like Indiana. And the other thing that we talked about, and I didn't realize this, Maria, until a couple of years ago, that, for apportioning representatives, you actually count illegal aliens. That's ridiculously unfair, and the only real way to fight back against it is for us to redistrict in some ways as aggressively as these hard blue states have done.
And we've said it before, and I've mentioned it during my weekday program, which you can find on our podcast on any of your favorite podcasting sites at The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier, that right now the Democrats are desperate for power. They're desperate for any type of influence. They're desperate for any type of control. It's the control freaks that have now lost control, and they're going into their freak out mode, and that's why they're threatening to do what they do. In fact, I saw on social media the actual official Democrat page on Facebook for the National Democrat Party had mentioned that they want the redistricting in California, aka overthrowing the third-party entity that actually does their redistricting, so that way they can get a majority in Washington, in the House, in order to push for an impeachment of Donald Trump. That's their goal. Now, they're not going to get it, and it's hopeful dreaming, but that's their goal, because they are so angry and so desperate that for the first time, Republicans have actually done what they've said they were going to do. And they have a record of actually doing it now, and we're only 6 months into the administration. Imagine how much of a freak out they're going to be in for the next 3 years when they can't do anything about it. And that's why midterms next year are going to be extremely important. But this redistricting and so many other problems that we've seen as the underbelly of corruption in Washington, D.C. are being brought to light. And when we start fighting fire with fire, and we start playing the same games they do, but in a manner that's actually legitimate, in a manner that's actually justified, in a manner that's actually legal, and yet the Democrats are losing even more control, that's when the panic starts, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. Bring it to light. Let's figure it out and make sure that gerrymandering doesn't happen. For example, Texas's congressional district number 11, I want to say, has a 300-mile radius from largely rural communities all the way, and then there's a sliver of it in the southeastern corner that trails all the way into the tip of Austin, Texas, a very progressive blue district area. Tell me why you would need to do that little tiny trail all the way to the little tip of Austin, Texas, in order for Democrats to have some type of influence to potentially compete with Republicans in the rest of the district 300 miles away. That's kind of insane to me. That's called gerrymandering, and it's about to stop, because Republicans now are going to redraw lines that actually make it better for everybody across the board. It gets better with how the Texas state legislature is working on this issue. We'll cover that when we come back around the corner, because now they're laying down the law. Kind of a day late and a dollar short, but I'm glad they're getting on board and finally starting to play offense. It's the Voice of Reason's Weekend Edition. Got a lot to cover. Stay right here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. It's your Patriot on the Prairie. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Yes, it is. What's up? Welcome back into it. So great to have you here as usual for another week. And if you want to find our social media, we are all at the same handle at Hoosier Reason, HOOSER Reason, on all of your social media pages. I need some help on TikTok. If you have a TikTok page, find us on there, Hoosier Reason. I have, for some reason, I have been lumped into liberal TikTok, and I don't know why, but you should see the comments on my posts that I do on TikTok, and I try to put different clips of the show on there regularly throughout the week, multiple times a day, and the comments, but just insane. Now, it's fun, and I'll respond to a few of them just to poke the bear. But if you have a TikTok, find us at Hoosier Reason, HOOSER Reason, and you can debate with some of them. Somehow my algorithm got my content onto lib TikTok, and I don't know why, because the only comments that I get a few followers here and there, but the only comments that I get are crazy Democrats who are just angry, trying to mock everything that we say on this show. And I find it funny. It's not bothering me, but you can go on there and chime in, have some fun, go crazy with those guys, because there's some insane comments that are being made. Kind of like the insane things that Democrats are doing when you see the state of Texas and the Democrat legislature leave the state. So here we're at for the update, the latest as of this weekend. They still were not able to make a quorum to activate the legislature on Friday. And the state legislature, the Speaker of the House, Dustin Burrows in the state of Texas, talking and saying this.
Finally, today, Dr. Greg Bonning will file House Bill 3, the House's priority legislation for flood recovery and infrastructure funding. Developed after 25 hours of testimony from Texans whose lives were upended by the July 4th floods. To those in California, Illinois, New York, or Massachusetts, wherever you may be, hear this. The bill cannot be referred to committee without a quorum. Every hour you remain away is time stolen from those Texans in need. Each one of you knows that eventually you will come back.
Yeah, so I don't know what it's doing. Democrats feel very proud of themselves that they left the state fleeing, not doing their job, but now playing the victim. I don't really understand the mindset there.
We did it! Yeah!
I guess I feel very productive in the fact that they're fighting against it. It's not going anywhere. And in fact, I'm glad Republicans are finally stepping into the offense instead of playing the defense, waiting for them to return on their timeline. Hey, you know what? We're going to throw this bill out there. We have to do recovery for the floods that happened down in the Kerrville area. And you need to get back here so we can vote on this along with the redistricting. But we can't do any work until you actually return. So according to the Speaker of the House, Dustin Burrows, not only are they putting up the offense now and putting up other bills to actually get done because all of productivity at all has been stalled, which is kind of crazy, but he's apparently now frozen their paychecks to where it's a hard paper check as opposed to a direct deposit. They have to go into the Capitol in Austin to pick up their check. And they've also tightened up their expenditure budgets for each of the legislators for travel expenses and for staffing and so on and so forth. Hey, if you're not going to do your job, you're not going to get paid. And that's just the way it's going to be. So let's see how long that this is going to take. Apparently, they're going to try another quorum this next week, and we'll see how many Democrats actually return after their pocketbooks, which to them is the most important thing on the face of the earth, is going to be squeezed, and what's going to happen from there on out. Finally, my question is, why does it take so long for Republicans to start playing offense instead of always playing defense? Why? I know we've been conditioned to play defense. We're always on our heels. We always have to come up with a response after Democrats control the dialogue and control the narrative and control the media. It's been that way for a long time. We're finally starting to get the huevos, so to speak, in order to push back, but it's taken us long enough, by golly. But they're still trying to change this narrative. And their narrative is that we're being a puppet to Donald Trump and that we're being unconstitutional, which is not the case in any way, shape, or form. In fact, Joe Walsh, a commentator who claims to be Mr. Conservative, but has now left the Republican Party to endorse AOC. Yeah, that Joe Walsh says right now that MAGA Republicans just want to overturn the Constitution and that the Constitution is in our way and that we're openly advocating for just ridding the Constitution completely for us to impose our nationalistic mentality of authoritarianism under Donald Trump. We'll talk about patriotism when we come back. Stay here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. Truth, reason, and common sense. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Welcome back to the program. Great to have you along for the ride as usual. Always a fun show, man. We got so much to cover and so little time to do it as usual. But cultural issues, always a fun one that we like to discuss, and it's important as well. We're seeing wokeness die off, which is kind of exciting. We see the whole Sydney Sweeney issue that we've been talking about. So many others have focused on as well. But overall, when it comes to patriotism, the pride for nation, nationalism, actual pride for country, which apparently is really, really bad or something. I don't know why it's bad to be prideful of your nation, but are we getting it back? We've seen a really low mark on popularity of patriotism over the last few years. Now we're starting to maybe see America first and that movement come back with pride and love for this country. But what's the next generation look like, and where do we go when it comes to national pride? That's where we go to our...
Let's go to the Hoosier Media Hotline.
Thanks, Dre. Really happy to have on the program to talk about this and more. He is the founder and executive director of the Ramos Research Institute. He's also with Young Voices. Really happy to have on Alejandro Ramos. Alejandro, how are you, my friend?
Good. How are you, Andy? Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, really appreciate you jumping on here. Yeah, there's so many ways I want to take this with you, but do you think that first and foremost, we're getting national pride back? Are we seeing patriotism on the rise here in the United States?
I don't know if that's the case. Polls are showing an all-time low for patriotism, especially amongst the American youth. Just 18% of young Americans feel extremely proud to be an American, which for me is quite disappointing to see as being part of the youth community. Myself, I'm the son of immigrants, of parents who left Cuba, right, who fled Cuba due to communism. And I was raised to love this country, that, sometimes things may be good, sometimes things may be great, and other times things might be lacking. But you know what? It's the place that gave us the opportunity to do great things, so we should love it for all it is.
Yeah, amen to that. I love hearing that. And there's so many directions I want to go there, but you mentioned your Cuban ancestry. Let's talk about that for just a moment. The Cuban community overall, very conservative, very patriotic, very loving of the American culture because, like you said, I mean, your parents and so many others realized what communism actually looked like by fleeing that nation. Why do you think that so many, especially even in the younger generations, look at that and say, hey, maybe we should mimic our system off of what they're doing down there in Cuba?
Yeah, I think that I always say, and, I have this conversation with my family. I'm like, socialism and communism on paper looks beautiful, right? But in society, when you enact it, it never works out, right? And you're aiming for this equality of everyone. There's no such thing as equality for everyone in a system like that, where, someone's in charge and someone is the one telling you, you could get this, you can't get that. So, it's really sad to see that so many people are really flocking to this, this school of thought where, I think that the other issue is that there's a lot of people that are misinformed and that young people and people in general aren't able to experience these things, right? Most people haven't left the country, right? I tell people, I'll pay for your flight, go experience this, and then come back and let me know how it is. And I've had friends that have traveled, after their whole lives of not traveling, and they're like, whoa, things are really different in other places. So I think it's an interesting thing when people actually get out of their house and experience the world outside of the United States.
Yeah, it's a really great point. It's kind of the mindset of the grass is greener on the other side, right? I mean, they've grown up with all of these freedoms, all of these rights, all of these liberties here in the United States. So obviously, if it's bad here and we have it so good while being bad, then obviously these other systems must be better around the world, right? That's the kind of mindset that they're going into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what I'm seeing, that it's this sort of, mentality. But, it's really not the case. I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to travel the world. And, you see things in other countries. Even in Cuba, I had the opportunity to go back to Cuba, see my family, that's still living there. And it's really sad conditions. So, people just need to be able to go past, what's being pushed to them in social media, on both sides and really see the other side and really try to understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's a great point. Let's talk about the education, because obviously if they're thinking that these places are so great, how much of the education system have to play into that by teaching, the 1619 Project and saying that we're just a bunch of racists and that we're just slave owners and that how we're no good in this nation? Does that have an influence on the young generation as they're learning about this nation on why, number one, they don't have American pride, and number two, why they think these other nations are so great?
Well, I think it absolutely does. I am a strong believer, even when I was going through high school, I've always been very opinionated since being a young child. Mm-hmm. And I always said that my teachers and my professors, when I got to the university level, I shouldn't know where they stand politically, right? You're here to teach me facts, not your personal opinion. And although I think it's important to learn our American history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, there's a way of teaching it, to be able to say this was our past And look how much we've grown since then, and look at the incredible things this country has done for people around the world and for our own citizens, versus, making the point of we're still a bad place.
Sure.
I've been blessed that I've had some terrific educators, both in high school and then when I got to the college level, where I felt engaged. And it was a place where you were able to have these conversations, and you didn't know where these professors sat on the political spectrum. And that allowed you to express your opinion, and as long as you were backing it up by fact, you were able to share whatever thoughts you had. And I think that's really the system that we need to, focus on, is getting to a place where students, whether if they're on the left or the right, are able to have a courageous dialogue, as I like to call it, in the classroom, but based on fact, not opinion and feelings and emotions.
Yeah, amen to that. I'm right there with you. I had a teacher that actually, the one that got me into the idea of government and politics and going down the road that I eventually went into with radio, where he was our government teacher. And I could tell that he was slightly on the left side of the aisle. But what I loved about his class, and he was probably one of my favorite classes I've ever taken, was that when we would have debates in class and he would spark a debate to have the students be able to articulate and argue back and forth and come up with ideas and defend their positions, as if things started to die off on either side, he would be able to throw in stats or numbers or a different angle for us to continue that conversation. And it was great being able to have a new dialogue and keep the conversation going, and knew that it was in an unbiased way coming from really him. That being said, let's take it a little bit further here. As you know, there's the old adage that, of course, if you're young and a Republican, you have no heart. If you're old and a Democrat, you have no brain. Let's apply that to patriotism. If you are growing up as an activist, wanting to change the world as a child in high school, whatever, and wanting to be that progressive, do you see patriotism grow the older you get, or is it still just a mindset of how much you really love or distaste the country?
Well, I would like to say yes, but I think patriotism overall is down. It's not just with youth; it's with everyone. And I think that the root cause of this issue is the lack of civics education that we have in our country. This is an area that I love and that I focus on and that I've done a lot of work in. And in 2022, only 22% of eighth graders were civic literate. And that's at an all-time low. I think that's off the top of my head, that's the lowest score that we've ever scored on these exams.
Wow.
And then people grow up, and then they're the same adults that don't know what the three branches of government are, don't know what the functions of local, state, and the federal level are. So people, I don't think that at face value people hate America. I think at face value people are confused, and they don't know so much that they just react with negative feelings and negative emotions, right? So I think that if we were to build robust civic curriculum across the United States that wouldn't be skewed to the left or to the right, because civics has become this thing that everyone's scared of, right? The left doesn't like it, the right doesn't like it, but it's just, once again, teaching about America, talking and telling students the basics. What are the foundations of America? Here are the foundational documents that you should be aware of. These are the three branches of government. The basic things that everyone should know and that students all over the world know about their own governments. I think that that's something that if we are able to incorporate civics curriculum and even a media literacy curriculum here in the United States, at different levels, I think that it should be something that starts at local and state level. It should not be a federal level thing.
Sure.
Man, I think we would skyrocket and patriotism would go through the roof.
That's a really great point. I love the quote that you kind of referenced there as well from Ronald Reagan that said, it's not that Democrats are dumb, it's just that there's so much that they just don't know. And it really does make sense if we're not educated or understand the issues, because when the media runs with a story and they say Donald Trump's trampling the Constitution, or that Republicans are breaking the law, or that we're becoming an authoritarian nation, if we don't know the Constitution, know the laws on what we can and cannot do as elected officials, there are some very gullible people that are not up on their civics that actually understand, that would believe that idea. And that's why we have so many people, I think, right now that really truly believe that what's going on in the nation at the moment is really truly a quote unquote authoritarian regime. And it's really just from the lack of understanding the way the government works.
I do really think so, because again, if people had a basic understanding, right, and you don't have to be you don't have to have a PhD in government or political science, but just a basic understanding, you would say, oh, this makes sense, or, I may disagree with this, but this is legal or constitutional or whatnot. And I think that we're living in an era of outrage, right? I write on Substack once a week, and I talk about all these issues of civics, culture, and democracy. And we now are living in a society of outrage instead of understanding, right? We don't try to understand the other person, right? We jump to right away, these people, right? And I think that has become, really damaging for society to be able to see. And, it was something that you briefly touched upon, regarding you seeing something and right away you're jumping the gun and ready to, go on the attack on social media or based on what you're consuming. And we're seeing this with hashtag activism, right? It's so easy to go online and put hashtag blah, 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 but then not really understanding the issue, right? You could take the latest issue and the trending one, hashtag Free Palestine, where people are not understanding the hundreds of years of history.
Yeah, that's a great point. Alejandro, we got to take a break here. Hate to cut you off, but when we come back, I want to continue that conversation about the keyboard warriors and the influence they're having on society. Back after this for your weekend edition of The Voice of Reason. Stay here.
This is The Voice of Reason. Where Hoosier-holics gather every week. This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Yeah, welcome back to it. One segment left for this hour of The Voice of Reason. Great to have you as always. Great conversation right now as we're talking about patriotism. We are talking about ways to bring pride back in the nation and education on the civic level with Alejandro Ramos. He is the founder and executive director for the Ramos Research Institute, also with the Young Voices. So let's talk about, Alejandro, how we can possibly, if we can even, save the older generations, your generation, my generation, the ones above them. Because if we do institute civic classes, if we do institute patriotism back in our education system, we could save the younger generations. But the ones that have already gone through that system and have been brainwashed, are they too far gone? Can we save them? What can we do about those moving forward?
Well, I don't think that anyone is too far gone. I like to be optimistic, in this area. But I think that there's a lot of fantastic organizations that are doing really good work in this area of bringing people, from other sides of it, from, the two sides of the aisle together to have conversations, whether it's Brave Angels or the Builders, to really have people understand. Because at the end of the day, I think the media likes to think, or makes us think, that we are a lot more divided than we actually are. And, from conversations that I have and the research that I do, and a lot of great research that's being published out there by academics, a lot of us believe in a lot of the same things. It's the fringe issues, right? That, the polarizing issues, whether it's gun control or abortions, that is, the red button issues that people think that, because we believe this, we must be, far left or far right extremists. But in reality, I think that if we were to have a block party and bring our entire street together and say, okay, we're all going to organize ourselves by political belief, and you start asking questions, people would be like, wait, you had a Trump sign in your driveway last year, and I had a Harris one, we actually believe in 70% of the same things. Very little that we disagree with. So I think if we get to a point where people start to understand that and stop vilifying people, I think, like I said, we would have such a change in society where people would be willing to have this courageous dialogue and be open to having conversation, which without going to the point that you just made of, you're a Nazi or a fascist. Because I think that's been very damaging to, American society and, the world overall.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's been damaging for society. It waters down the true meaning of words when you call someone a fascist, when you don't even know what the definition of fascism really is. I mean, we water these terms down and we overuse them to where we become desensitized to them. And that's, to me, very dangerous. Words have meaning and words have power. And when you overuse them like that, then it's very dangerous. Last question for you, Alejandro, and I appreciate your time very much. On the front of the school, school and the education system and what we can do to get them more engaged. Better civics classes. I also grew up doing debate in high school competitively, which was a lot of fun. Is that something that you do encourage, is having kids be able to not only study it, but also challenge themselves to do professional debate, even if they don't want to be in politics moving forward, to at least understand how to have an articulate conversation and argue with someone properly?
Absolutely. And I wish that we were on camera because I just have the biggest smile on my face right now. I think that that's so important. It's something that we're developing at the Ramos Research Institute is the citizenship empowerment framework. And I think that civics needs to go further than just the basics, right? It can't just be the foundational knowledge, right? You need to have the foundational knowledge. You need to have the media literacy. But then you also need to have the engaged aspect, right? You should be able to either participate in debate clubs or participate in Model UN or, mock trial or all these different types of activities that high schools have, colleges have, because you should be able to gain those skills to be successful, right? Whether it's in the classroom through simulations and activities like that, or, out of it with extracurricular activities. I think that that's incredibly important. And, I think that once people start gaining these skills, we would have much more informed conversations that, again, wouldn't turn to this nasty fighting of name calling and the nastiness that we're seeing today. So absolutely, and I'm so glad that you asked me that question, because I think that universities and schools, K through 12 schools, have the potential to do so much if we focus on how to engage students on the things that really matter.
That's what it's about, my friend. Trying to make society a better place and doing it one generation at a time, and that's why we appreciate everything that you guys are doing. It is Alejandro Ramos, the founder and executive director of the Ramos Research Institute. You can find them online and see all the great work. Alejandro, we appreciate the time very much, my friend. Keep up this fight. Got to get you back on and do it again real soon.
Thank you, Andy. Happy to be here.
You betcha. Yeah, great conversation. You know what? As the eternal optimist on this program, I completely agree. We can always save individuals, and we can make them at least recognize the fact that we live in the greatest nation on the face of the earth, even if they don't recognize it themselves. We are out of time, though, for this hour. Back at it again before you know it. Until then, be your own voice of reason. We'll see you on the radio. Bye.